So, good evening to all our viewers. We are all gathered again for another Facebook Live webinar organized by Manila Hearing Aid. This 1-hour Facebook webinar is filled with new learnings, and you may also interact with our newly invited guest speakers later by sending your questions in the comment section during the live question and answer session. This free live event is in partnership with Interacoustics and KonsultaMD. And as our way to thank everyone for joining us tonight, all viewers will receive a free KonsultaMD health plan code from us that they can claim after the live event. We will also be choosing 10 lucky viewers via electronic picker who will receive freebies and merchandise from our partner brand Interacoustics. Once again, thank you for joining us, and I am your host, who will receive freebies and merchandise from our partner brand Interacoustics, Employee Hearing Care. Once again, thank you for joining us tonight, and who will receive freebies and merchandise from us to everyone in this live event. So, have you ever heard of occupational noise-induced hearing loss? Well, for background, occupational hearing loss can occur when an employee is exposed to loud noise while at work, and it's one of the most common work-related illnesses. Noise-induced hearing loss is usually associated with tinnitus or ringing in the ears, poor mental health, communication problems, and a higher risk of accidents as they may fail to detect warning signals, alarms, or potential hazards. Most Filipinos are not aware that hearing loss is not just hereditary but could be developed due to bad hearing care. Hearing damage over time is a normal part of the aging process, but you have control over how fast and how severely noise-induced hearing loss affects you. Fortunately, occupational hearing loss can be minimized or even be prevented if health and safety professionals, the employers, and workers can all help together and prevent noise-induced hearing loss. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. Meet Dr. Christopher Calaquian. He is a notable ENT doctor who is currently the Dean of the newly established College of Medicine in Pamantasan, Lungsod ng Muntinlupa and Ospital ng Muntinlupa. He is also the chairman of the Philippine Academy of Neurotology, Otology, and Related Sciences, or PANORS, a community of ENT doctors and specialists dedicated to improvement of hearing and balance of Filipinos under the Philippine Society of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery. Dr. Calaquian is currently an attending ENT doctor for the following hospitals: the Philippine General Hospital, Asian Hospital and Medical Center, Hospital ng Muntinlupa, and Manila Doctors Hospital. So now let's watch and listen to his discussion.
Good evening, I am Dr. Christopher Calaquian, and I am here to talk about noise as a silent killer. The WHO in Geneva back in 1997 on the prevention of noise-induced hearing loss said that exposure to excessive noise is the major avoidable cause of permanent hearing impairment worldwide. And I'm not just talking about sudden hearing loss from a virus etiology or acoustic trauma, but we are talking about the slow, gradual, the insidious, the creeping, day-to-day exposure to an invisible pollution that is noise. And this same noise is found in our workplace, in our homes, and even in our recreational areas. So what are the effects of noise? First, it's permanent. There's no cure. Next, it's cumulative. It adds up in the next 5 to 10 years of exposure. And it happens at 85 to 90 decibels or above of sound exposure for 8 hours in a day. And it is by any type of sound, even traffic sounds or even music. So what are the characteristics of this noise-induced hearing loss? One, it's permanent, it's symmetrical, both ears have it, and there's a primary damage to the hearing cells, so it's sensorineural hearing loss. There's a history of long-term noise exposure, and there's more than 85 decibel volume of sound for 8 hours per day. And the loss is gradual over the first 5 to 10 years, so you won't notice it at first. It involves the higher frequencies from 3 to 8 kilohertz, and even the speech recognition score is consistent to the loss. And the hearing loss stabilizes after the noise exposure is terminated. Now, what are the anatomic mechanisms of this noise-induced hearing loss? First is the mechanical injury of the basilar membrane. It's a structure in the inner ear, and there's metabolic exhaustion of the hearing cells, of the outer hair cells, and there is an activity-induced narrowing of blood vessels leading to ischemia or poor blood supply, like a hypertension inside your inner ear. And there is ionic poisoning from the perilymph. So, in short, our hearing cells, called the cochlear cells, they literally die from the noise. So from your left side, where you see healthy cochlear cells, to the right side, where you see a sea of dead cochlear cells. Now, what are the factors involved in the development of noise-induced hearing loss? The first is sound intensity. The higher the intensity or the volume of sound, the more risk for noise-induced hearing loss. The length of time the employee is exposed to the noise. So the longer the duration of time, the more risk. And of course, the individual susceptibility. Some individuals are more genetically prone to develop noise-induced hearing loss. The WHO and the British Occupational Hygiene Society came up with a table on the permissible noise exposures. And they say that at 85 decibel sound intensity, you're only allowed to work for 8 hours in a day. And you will notice as you increase by 5 decibels, you reduce by half the work duration per day. Okay? And even the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA of USA, came up with a similar table, but they increased their tolerance to 90 decibels as the minimum. And just to give you an idea what these decibels sound like, a 30 decibel is already a whisper or in a quiet library. A normal conversation or a typewriter, if there's still a typewriter, is producing 60 decibels. A lawn mower or the truck traffic is already at 90 decibels. So you're already reaching the minimum sound intensity that can produce noise-induced hearing loss by just exposing yourself in traffic. The pneumatic drill, the chainsaw is 100 decibel. The loud rock concert is 115 decibels. And the jet engine from an airplane is 140 decibels. At the workplace at high risk for noise-induced hearing loss are, according to WHO, based on the claims filed and granted by them, are 1, forestry, 2, mining, construction, manufacturing such as shipbuilding, the conveyance or those with conveyors, and others, the miscellaneous is the medical workplace. Yes, the medical workplace. And I've discussed this with numerous doctors and dentists that the noise in the medical and dental workplace really poses a threat to their hearing. Now, in the industries in the Philippines, the following have the different noise levels that workers are exposed to. We have mining, wherein they have blasting at 138 decibels, construction in tunnels at 105 to 107 decibels. Even the iron and steel, the rolling mills, are producing 94 to 99 decibels of noise. Further on, in the industry of food, like milk, their evaporator room produces 95 decibels, tire and rubber at 97 decibels. Even the car manufacturing, with their grinding, produces 97 decibels maximum. And even the cement manufacturing produces 102 decibels of noise. So what? People lose their hearing anyway as they age. The expected hearing loss with age comes at 3,000 hertz and they come at 50 years old of age, there's a loss of 10 decibels. 60 years of age, 25 decibels, and 70 years of age at 35 decibels. And this hearing threshold or loss rises with age at the higher frequencies. And they're more apparent in men, they're more evident in men than in women. So even at age 60, a healthy person not exposed to noise does not have an impaired hearing at the age of 60. Although by age there is decrease in hearing, the decrease is not that great to produce a disability or an impairment. But a 60-year-old male that is exposed to noise may have more than 25 decibels of hearing loss at 90 decibel exposure, and a greater loss at that at 95 and 100 decibel of noise. To further exemplify, among male carpenters exposed daily to construction noise, their hearing at age 55 is even worse than a normal 60-year-old male not exposed to noise. In fact, a 25-year-old male carpenter has the ear of a 50-year-old male who has no noise exposure. Other effects of noise, other than the ear, you have physiological stress from noise, such as hypertension, palpitations, the narrowing of our blood vessels of the skin. There is increase in metabolism as you hear noise, and increased muscular tension. The Philippine government, since 50 years ago, had the Presidential Decree 1152 that set the standards for noise levels to be allowed in certain locations, in certain zoning and land use classification, and even standards for acceptable noise levels for noise-producing equipment. And even had the National Pollution Control Commission to enforce this law on noise standards. In House Bill number 3875 by Congress, it reiterated that it is part of the responsibility of the state to protect and promote the right to health of its people, and corollary to RA 8749, or Clean Air Act, that classifies noise as a pollutant. That same bill even included private and public motorcycles and tricycles in controlling noise pollution. The airline industry has been in the forefront in protecting its employees from occupational noise, and from the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, as shown here, their manual tackled standards from noise evaluation or measurement to certification and to even noise reduction. They even provide certification, as shown here. This is an example of their noise certificate. The ESHOT, or Environmentally Sustainable and Health Urban Transport of DOH, aimed in decreasing air and noise pollution and the greenhouse gas emission from motor vehicles, pedestrian footpaths, bicycle lanes. They recommended that noise levels be set by our DNER at only 60 decibels at daytime and 50 decibels at nighttime. In the 17th Congress, the Senate even proposed a noise pollution control board, similar to the Noise Pollution Control Commission before. And there have been other Senate bills that wanted to enforce the use of mufflers to motor vehicles to reduce noise pollution. And even House Bill 1839, or the Anti-Pollution Act of 2010. Even the prohibition of unnecessary use of videoke and karaoke or other sound amplifying equipment was proposed by Congress. Even the late Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago was cognizant of the fact that noise from airports should be controlled, and even relocate these airports to its proper zoning. And even the regulation of motor vehicles in residential areas was proposed by Representative Arroyos in the 15th Congress. So in the recent 18th Congress, there have been town hall meetings by Congress to unify all these bills and come up with an improved and comprehensive act. We are still waiting for this bill to be finished. In the latest meeting in November 29, 2022, of the Philippine Academy of Neurotology, Otology, and Related Sciences, or PANORS, which is a subspecialty group of the Philippine Society of Otolaryngology Head and Neck Surgery. It had its collaboration for hearing conservation programs in which Manila Hearing Aid Company, or MAC, was one of the collaborators, to be able to come up with a position paper in the near future to help government in not just crafting a law, but also on its implementation process someday. Other countries have already been way ahead of us in terms of setting legal limits for equipment noise, like Italy, France, Sweden, Portugal, and even India. So we need to come up with our own national program soon. It is proposed that certain levels of strategies in the preventive management are needed, namely primary prevention, such as individual, environmental, and occupational strategies. Unfortunately, there is no existing secondary prevention, as there is no definitive cure for noise-induced hearing loss. But for tertiary prevention, here is where legislation and compensation come in. For primary prevention, or individual strategies, we have to increase awareness through education on hearing, such as this. We had to limit duration of noise exposure. We avoid situations of excessive noise. We use appropriate, affordable, and acceptable ear protective devices. We insulate the sound if needed. And we have to apply noise reduction technology. Personal protective devices such as earplugs, ear molds, and ear muffs could really reduce the amount of damaging noise that comes into your ears, and show that the ear muffs having the greatest effective reduction of 25 to 30 decibels. Next in the primary prevention are your environmental strategies. Just to give you an idea, in school, there's an average exposure of 87.4 decibels, mostly in the school gyms and the lunchrooms, the canteens, and even the bus rides of our children. In indoor sporting events, there's an average exposure of 99.5 decibels, mostly in basketball games. In the traffics or highways, the intersections in EDSA, while commuting, exceeds 100 decibels. In hospitals, an average exposure of 120 decibels in the ICU, making pregnant women more prone to having birth defects or fetal deaths because of the noise exposure. The rock concerts produce 110 decibels of exposure to our musicians and to the audience. The disco, or the bars, as they call it now, produces 90 to 100 decibels of exposure. So what can be done? In school, we need to educate the school administrators. They need to have a conservation program, a hearing conservation program in their schools. And we have to increase awareness in our own children. For indoor sports, it's the same. In the highways, we have to involve the MMDA. We need to fix our engines. We need to repair or maintain our motor engines and have regulatory controls. In the concerts or in the bars, we need to protect our musicians. And of course, we need to limit our bar exposures. In occupational strategies, Vitasa et al., Dr. Vitasa et al. Found that 66.7%, or 7 out of 10 of Filipino industrial workers, have noise-induced hearing loss, mostly in mining companies. So what can be done? We need to reduce noise by engineering means or to actively control the noise of machines. So there has to be a proper choice of equipment. There has to be proper maintenance and even replacement if needed. And even we can even use noise dissemination by putting the machines in open spaces. We can even do soundproofing. We can do noise absorption, wherein we enclose the machine itself. Or we can do enclosure, wherein we enclose the people around the machine. And there has to be some administrative control, periodically rotating the staff from high-risk areas to low-risk areas whenever possible, provides recovery periods for transient threshold shift to return to normal thresholds. And this is an example of noise absorption wherein you enclose the machine. And in the figure 3, enclosure where you enclose the people operating the machine. Companies may even use a holistic approach, not just to comply on certain noise regulations, but also to operationalize preventive approaches such as making their employees partners in establishing policies and strategies, setting up risk management in their processes, profiling their employees, and have personalized assessment and strategies to their noise exposures, train them on the methods and materials that will be deployed to prevent hearing loss, and even customize their personal equipment by fit checking. And do regular and timely audiometry monitoring during and after work periods. Also, do not forget to have their baseline audiometry and involve their family in the prevention of hearing loss, since noise is also existing in their non-workplace areas, such as the home. Compensation is also part of the tertiary prevention, and from the Employee Compensation Commission, deafness is an occupational and compensable disease at number 4 on their list. Supposed to be our Social Security System, or SSS, provides such compensation for total and partial disability, such as hearing impairment, but the rehabilitative services remain in question up to now. The same goes with our GSIS for government employees, and still the need for rehabilitative services from them is still wanting. Before I end this talk, let me go back to the recreational noise that is found in almost all households in any socioeconomic status. Prevention begins at home. Apple sold over 250 million or more iPod players since 2002, and 184 to 246 million portable audio devices sold in the European Union. The personal listening devices, the children nowadays, they listen to these PLDs too long, even for the whole day, because of the rechargeable batteries. Children nowadays listen to their PLDs too loud, because the PLDs can produce 80 to 120 decibels of music. The millennials, the Gen Z, and even the Gen Alpha, they are all risk takers and sensation seekers. What used to be quiet activities before, like walking, reading, and eating, now carries even a noise exposure risk, because children use their PLDs or their listening devices even when they're walking, even when they're reading and just eating. Unlike occupational noise, no one monitors their hearing. They do not get annual hearing tests as mandated by hearing conservation programs. No one makes noise surveys on personal music system of a typical listener. Unlike occupational noise, where the noise is ambient or in the free field, recreational noise by PLDs are near field of the ear or inside the ear canal. Thus, the physical differences with occupational noise makes it difficult to apply the same damage risk criteria of international standards of OSHA and NIOSH. So to avoid earphones, avoid loud places, don't scream, earmuffs, use earmuffs, use education, earplugs, hands over the ears, limit listening time, move away, speakers, not headphones, take a break, turn the volume down, are all the individual preventive strategies that you can use. And if you want a life of peace and quiet, don't move to the Philippines. Our country is very noisy. And with that, thank you very much for listening.
So thank you, Dr. Calaquian, for sharing these to all our viewers. So I agree with you, Doctor. Workplace noise exposure is a significant contributor to hearing difficulties. Actually, unaddressed hearing loss can greatly impact one's life. And and it could hinder an employee's ability to be productive at work. So usually they have difficulty in building a good working relationship with their colleagues due to miscommunication, and often they feel isolated and struggle to interact well with their coworkers. Therefore, it is very important to promote hearing health in the workplace. By integrating hearing care, the employers can enhance safety protocols and ensure that all workers have access to appropriate hearing protection and support, such as providing regular hearing screenings, access to hearing health information, advising employees to follow safe listening practices, and providing resources on hearing loss prevention. So the basic hearing screening exams such as the tympanometry, purotone audiometry, and speech audiometry are some of the recommended tests that companies can provide to their employees. Therefore, by promoting hearing wellness in the workplace and providing yearly hearing screening tests, employers can actually improve productivity and avoid healthcare expenses. Okay, to those who just joined, all viewers will receive a free KonsultaMD code from us. Our customer service will reach out to you within 24 hours, or you may directly send us a message. So moving on, let me introduce our second guest speaker. Our second speaker is Lilian Bjørn Nielsen. She is the Senior Product Manager of Audiometry and Impedance for Interacoustics, one of Manila Hearing Aid's leading partner brands. Her primary role is to ensure new technologies within audiometers and impedance measurements are brought to the market. She is also involved in new innovative product developments and technologies, as well as clinical evaluations, and has articles published in the hearing industry journals abroad. In recent years, Ms. Nielsen has joined the board of International Electrotechnical Commission to take part in the continuous development of standards within acoustic and audiology. So now let's all watch and listen to her discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Joel, for introducing me, and thank you for all of the viewers tonight. And also a big thank you to Manila Hearing Aid for inviting me to speak as a guest speaker on behalf of Interacoustics. Tonight I'll be focusing on occupational hearing health and what needs to be considered in the establishment of a occupational screening program. That is something that a few others have looked into also in the past, some of the greater organizations also, one of them being WHO, that last year ran a series on what is needed and what needs to be considered in establishing national screening programs. That not only goes for occupational hearing screening, but also screening of newborns or elderly or preschool. But for tonight, it will be with the focus on the occupational screening program. In regards to that, WHO states that there is a high number of individuals that is exposed to loud noises during their work life. In particular within certain industries, like also mentioned here, within the engineering industry, manufacturing, building and construction workers, and also people within the food and drink industry, and agriculture and entertainment. They are some of the ones that they mention are most likely to be exposed to loud noises during their work life. And that's why we need to look at what can be done in order to prevent loud noises to be present in these environments, and to ensure that the employees are not exposed to a noise level that causes hearing loss. What can be done to prevent that, to prevent a noise-induced hearing loss in an occupational setting? That is something when we look into it where the government or the local authority plays an essential role in creating a healthy hearing environment. Some of the things that needs to be done, that is to reduce the noise, is simply by distance or by wearing hearing protection. It can also be done by monitoring and controlling the occupations at risk, for instance by during noise dosimeters measures in the environment to see what noise the employees are exposed to. And it can also be done by doing hearing screening tests of the employees in these settings. The third one that I will also get back to that's really important, that is to educate. That is an important and essential bit of it also in order for the employees to accept and understand why it is that noise generates a hearing loss. And I'll get back to that a little bit later. So what is required in order to establish a noise-induced program where you look at occupational hearing screening? It is required that there is some kind of national commitment for the screening program, or at least a regional focus that takes responsibility of ensuring that such a program is established and ran. That requires laws and regulations to be in place to ensure that it takes place and happens, and it requires some education to create awareness. So some of the considerations that needs to be done, that is to look at what are the guidelines within establishing a screening program, who is responsible for running a screening program, and who will finance a screening program. They are some of the considerations that needs to be done. I'll look a little bit at the first three we have here in how we can do it, reducing the noise, monitor on a regular basis, and educate. So when we talk about reducing the noise, one of the international standards that has been established a while ago is ISO 1999. That is looking at the noise exposure that people are exposed to, both in occupational setting, but also in leisure activities. What they mention is that the noise can be reduced either by distance or by wearing hearing protection. And that is what we need to pay attention to in the work environment that we talk about here. So which occupations is this a problem for, and what is it that we then can do? We can either increase the distance to the noise source, or we can wear hearing protection, or in other ways shelter the equipment that is creating the loud noise. The second thing that is important to consider in this regard is to monitor and control occupations at risk. That is something the ISO is also describing, but in addition to that, it's something that's also established in more national standards and what is also quite often needed in order to run a screening program like this one here. Then an example of that is the Australian screening program that's also having a guideline, an established guideline for occupational hearing screening. And another one is the OSHA, who's also used for providing guidelines to how a screening program must be ran on a more regional level in USA. And the third one that can be considered in it, that is also to ensure that the hearing protection that is provided is actually valid. And is doing what it is stating that it's doing and protecting in the way that we expect it to. That is also described in a variety of national and international standards, and I have listed those also on this slide here. Of course, what is of most interest to me and what I'll focus a little bit on today, that is what the audiometer needs to be capable of in order for us to measure the threshold. And that's what I'll get a little bit back into. What is also important, as I mentioned, is to educate and create awareness. We need to understand that when we state to workers that they need to wear hearing protection, it is something that's cumbersome. It's not nice to wear, and they don't feel that they're having a hearing loss right away. It is something that builds up over time, and that also means that because it's cumbersome, we tend to ignore that there is a need for us to wear the hearing protection. That means that there is a greater chance that they will not accept that they have to wear hearing protection. And they don't feel the consequence of not doing so until it's too late. And that's when you have not only a temporary threshold shift, but a permanent threshold shift and a hearing loss. Some of these things are important to communicate and create awareness of in order for workers to accept that they have to wear hearing protection and to understand what they can do in addition to protect themselves in their work environment. So it's generated with a stigma, you could say, to wear either hearing protection in the same way as it would be if we had to wear a helmet, but it may also generate something that causes the work to be harder to be done. So the same way as wearing gloves is harder to work with the equipment, when you're wearing hearing protection, it's harder to communicate with your coworkers and to hear what's said. And that's why it's more cumbersome to also wear it. So that we need to pay attention to in the way that's introduced. In the education and creating awareness, simply providing the gear and also having information available to the users and signs telling that they are in a noisy environment are some of the things that makes it easier to be a worker and remembering to wear the protection and why it is important again and again. So that's a little bit overall on why it is important and how to work with occupational hearing screening. Then I'll tune a little bit into the equipment of occupational hearing screening and why that's important and what Interacoustics has to offer within that. The referral rate when you do a screening is really important to consider. We talk about the sensitivity and the specificity of the equipment in the test procedure. If we generated a piece of equipment where a lot of individuals would fail the test or have a referral, so indicating that they have a hearing loss, then there would be a high level of follow-ups. And that's something that's really important to focus on, also stated by the series that was ran by WHO last year, that when we establish these national screening programs, we have to remember that as part of the screening program, we need to consider what is the follow-up, what needs to go on next. So what needs to take place when you have a referral of a individual at work indicating that the person is having a hearing loss. Are they seeking the doctor? Are they going to a second follow-up? So what are the procedures and who will pay for the procedures? That needs to be in place in order for a screening program to be successful. So they are some of the things to consider in an occupational screening setting. But we need to look at that the test needs to be fast, of course, as fast as possible in order for the workers to be back at work as soon as possible. But we also need to consider that the screening sensitivity and specificity is an important part of it. If we generate a lot of referrals, then we simply just have a lot of people that need follow-up visits to our doctor or others. And that is a huge burden in the way that this program is carried out. But it also needs to ensure that we are not generating false passes, sending people home thinking that they actually have an okay hearing. So that is what we really need to consider in making equipment for occupational screening. So there are different screening devices, and I just listed some of the things that are important to consider in the screening devices that are available in the market, and some of the things that we have seen important to people using screening equipment. First of all, simple things like it's portable and easy to carry around and bring with you. Other things that we hear is that it is important to have a device that's battery driven, preferable with standard batteries where it's easy to replace the battery if you're in the field. It needs to be equipment for this purpose, also with screening that can be run and operated with just a little training about the user itself. It's also important that the equipment is calibrated and that it's maintained. And that's also why service is an essential part of a screening program. Then it's important to use validated methods also to ensure the sensitivity and specificity of the measure. And that can be done with various procedures, and two of the more established one within screening, that is the Houston-Westlake screening procedure and also the Legacy. Other things we also hear that is that integration is a huge part of national screening programs, where some markets have decided that they would like to gather information about what the screening health is on a national level, and there it's important to them that the results are gathered and brought together to see that people both are being screened, but also to see what the condition is of the hearing health on a national level. So that integration is a part of that. As an alternative, some of the things that has been mentioned and is worth looking into also, that is screening alternatives such as OAE measures. That is not today a established procedure that is used widely, that is by far within occupational screening, pure tone audiometry. But measures like OAE is more objective. The patient do not have to respond themselves, and that is why an OAE measure could also potentially be a really good alternative as an objective measure of checking the hearing screening of occupational level. The two machines that Interacoustics has to offer, that is the AS608, that's a portable device, comes in a carrying bag where you have all-in-one device. It's battery driven on standard batteries, and it has the automated test used on Westlake in it. And that's a device we have had for quite some years now, and also a device that's used a lot for occupational screening at different locations and facilities. The other one that is a bit more recent, that was introduced a few years back, that is our headset called Luna, who is a audiometry screening headset, and is simply a headset with an audiometer built into it. And you can connect it to the device that you would like, either a tablet or a PC, by a USB plug. It's a small device, and it's reliable and portable, and it's fast to use in it. And that's two different devices we are having, so the Luna and the AS608. So why is it important to Interacoustics to focus on the accuracy and the validity of the measure? That I've talked a little bit about, and what are we doing in order to ensure that we provide equipment that is working for this screening purpose. Interacoustics takes part in developing and maintaining international standards and also national guidelines. And Interacoustics also achieve to comply with these standards and guidelines to ensure that the equipment that we are developing fulfills the national and international standards. And then again, it's important to consider services of the devices, and it's also important to consider research and how that is part of maturing and developing new equipment and new valid methods also for screening at occupational settings. So there are three of the things that Interacoustics considers the most in making and providing gear for measuring also at occupational screening. The one thing that we've also established that is really important to consider in that regards, that is training and education. And there I want to tune a little bit into our academy, Interacoustics Academy, that provides a lot of great material free for everyone to use. They are a huge part in training and educating and ensuring that we provide a gold standard for our equipment. The material from our academy is available on our homepage. You simply need to log in, and then you have access to a huge cohort of material that can be used. So I would like to end up by inviting you to develop your knowledge within the area and have a look at the material that we have available with our academy. That covers a little bit the overall, and that finalizes my presentation. And I look forward to the questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Nielsen. To share with everyone, this is one of the reasons why ENT doctors highly recommend doing hearing test procedures at Manila Hearing Aid. It is because the machines are developed by the world-leading supplier of equipment for diagnostic audiology, bringing the gold standard in providing precise and fast tools to assess patients' hearing. As mentioned by Ms. Nielsen, Interacoustics take part in the development and maintenance of international standards, as well as comply with the guidelines to ensure the validity and quality of the measurements. So thank you, Interacoustics and Ms. Nielsen, for sharing this with us. Okay, so now let's head on to the live question and answer session. Okay, can we post the first question here? Okay, so I'll try to read it down. Okay, so the question goes, what is the best way to open the conversation about hearing wellness in the workplace? Dr. Calaquian, we'll go
Yes.
with Dr. Calaquian. What's your opinion regarding the question?
Yes, thank you for that question. It's a good question, actually, in how to open up a conversation with regard to your employees. The first thing is you to be honest with them, be transparent with them, the pros and cons of having a hearing conservation program, and that you're not putting the program just to be able to have a reason to fire them or demote them. No, it's there to protect them from the hazards of noise. At the same time, it will prolong their productivity in the company. Instead of having employees who will be resigning at an early age because of hearing loss. So it's a win-win situation for both the employer and the employee, for having a hearing conservation program.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Calaquian. How about Ms. Nielsen? How do you open up the employees regarding hearing conservation?
I would say one of the most important things also is to focus on the awareness that needs to be raised for the employees. And as Dr. Christopher also mentions, that it is for them. If it's not taken care of and not addressed, then it has a social impact on how they will act, not only in the workplace, but also in their daily lives with their families. So they are one of the things to bring up and opening up with in the discussion with the employees. And as also mentioned a little bit during the talk, it's also that you may have some resistance in using some of the protection gear during the day, because it's also a hazard that you need to find it and wear it. So it's making sure that it is creating the awareness in the environment, so that the stuff is available and that it is within reach and easy to get access to during the day.
Yes, actually, companies or especially factories, they put the caution signs there that they should always wear the earmuffs, yeah, for protection. But in some cases, the employees, they I don't know if they forget to wear the earmuffs, or for reasons like they can't hear their their co-workers. So they actually removes part of the one side of the earmuffs when they're talking to their co-workers. But it should be posted there strictly to wear earmuffs all the time for factories. Okay. So can we post here the second question? Okay. I don't think I can read.
It's too small.
It's too small. Okay, I'll read it in our group WhatsApp group. So this question is from Miss Jennifer. So the question goes, how about employees in BPO who are using earphones, headsets almost more than 8 hours a day? Is there a recommended gadget that can be used? Is it necessary to also include in their annual PE the hearing screening? Ms. Nielsen, we'll go first with Ms. Nielsen.
I think it's a matter of considering the noise dose. So also, as mentioned, the ISO 1999 is considering the overall noise dose. And as such, there's nothing wrong in wearing the hearing devices of any kind that is presenting sound, as long as it's not within excessive loud presentation level. So it's a matter of considering the noise dose that is presented to the user. And there are various apps within that can be used for monitoring how loud the sound is being presented of the device. So it's considering that within it, and as it is with noise, it's a loudness scale. So just being in 50 decibels or 60 decibels for a while, and then having a loud noise, then going back down, is usually not a problem of the overall noise being exposed to. So it's consideration of the dose overall.
Okay. How about Dr. Calaquian?
Yes. Well, first, as mentioned a while ago, they have to use earmuffs. That's the best device that that could protect their ears from the noise. But of course, that's why the employees of the BPO have higher pay because of that hazard. We all know that. So another thing that you can tell them is to not to go beyond the 8-hour shift or the 8-hour duration. That's one. And then they have to rest their ears. So after the 8-hour shift, they have to provide the employee enough number of hours. If they can have them rest for 24 hours, better. So that to give time for the transient threshold shift to occur, meaning a temporary threshold shift. They could recover from the temporary threshold shift, as we call it. It's a temporary loss of hearing. But if you give time for the ear to recover, then they can recover. So that's the second one. Actually, the third. So we have earmuffs, limit the duration for 8 hours in a day, and give time to recover, for the ears to recover. And we did a study back then in the employees of the BPO, the call centers, and they really exhibit noise-induced hearing loss.
Okay, how about because BPO, some of them they use or ordinary earphones. I remember I had a patient before. She is using an earbud type of earphone. Do you highly advise using a noise canceling headphones to cut down the background noise so that users can hear speech at lower volumes? The noise canceling type of headphones for the BPO.
Yes, that could help, because if you reduce the background noise, then there'll be the tendency is to lower the volume, because you can hear the person you're talking to much better. So you don't need to increase the volume.
Okay, thank you, doctor. So there's another question here from Miss Marivic. So the question goes: aside from screening audiometry, how can OAE be used as a gold test in occupational and industrial screening? Dr. Calaquian?
Yes. Well, the OAE, since it's very portable and easy to use, it's a good screening tool. But just to assess the integrity of the cochlea, or the hearing organ of the ear, if it's losing its hearing capability or not. But to give details as to the degree of hearing loss or the type of hearing loss, then you need to do a proper audiometry test.
Okay. How about Ms. Nielsen? Do you advise to go directly to for example, the employee has hearing loss already. So during the yearly screening hearing test, do you advise to go straight to include pure tone, speech audiometry, and tympanometry as like a complete hearing test as instead of doing just the screening test?
By far, pure tone is the gold standard within screening, also occupational screening, and that is the one that is recognized with validated methods as the Beckes here, Houston, Westlake. That's where we get the threshold. So that is the true screening method, so to speak, and also the golden standard that we see. The benefit of OAE measures is that it's more objective, so and it's faster. So it's something we can do in just seconds to have a measure of what is going on in the ear. As such, OAE can potentially be used as a pre-screening instead of the pure tone, and provide an indication of if additional screening or follow-ups are needed. But it's not something that today is established in screening procedures as such. It is typically the pure tone that we see used, but it could potentially be because it is more objective also and faster in use.
And can I add, Dr. Joel?
Yes, doctor.
Once you do screening audiometry, of course, it's not advisable to do speech audiometry for all. What we do, we only do speech audiometry for those who exhibit hearing loss. Because as we all know, the pure tones are not, do not reflect actually the true state of hearing of an individual. It has to be the spoken words. So speech audiometry will play a role if they need rehabilitation or not.
Yes. Oh, thank you, doctor. So here's a question from Mr. Ronquillo. So the question goes, if the employee has a hearing loss, can the patient benefit from wearing a hearing aid device if the employee has hearing loss? Or actually, the question probably, can they wear the hearing aid? I mean, how will they benefit in terms of speech discrimination and once they have hearing loss, if they wear the hearing aid?
Yes.
And are they advised to wear it during work, or they can remove it while during work if it's noisy, if there's noise in the environment?
Well, in my practice, I prescribe hearing aid devices when a person has moderate hearing loss or more in the better ear. Okay, because at that state, he's already defined as having hearing impairment. So you need to prescribe a hearing aid device for that person. But as to your question, if you need to wear the hearing aid during work, it depends on the work. If your work will demand talking to other people, then you should wear the hearing aid device. But if the work will just involve, visual cues, you can work with just visual cues without talking to each other, or you're just working in a machine all alone by yourself, then you don't need to wear it during work. But if the place is really noisy,
You don't have to, right?
you don't need to wear the hearing aid because you need to wear a hearing protective device while at work. And then you just use the hearing aid device when you're already out of the workplace and in your home.
Okay, Miss Nielsen, your opinion regarding that question?
I think it covers it quite well, what Dr. Christopher just said, so I have nothing to add.
Okay, there's another question that was actually texted to me. So for people, this is a common question. I get it from patients. Like when they're using personal listening devices, how will they know if the volume is loud enough? Do some people they advise to put the maximum, put the volume or set the volume at 60% of its maximum capacity, or how will they gauge if the volume of their personal listening devices is just okay, just right?
Well, if I may answer.
Yes.
For our television sets, they have the volume. There's a green bar and a red bar. So don't go to the red bar. You have to limit your volume at the green bar. Or what I tell to my patients, only use half of the volume of your device and only use it for 30 minutes or even less. And then you have to rest your ear in between.
Yes, because like safe listening practices usually is a factor of like the intensity, the duration, and the frequency. So how about you, Miss Nielsen? How do you how you tell the person who's wearing the earphones all the time that the setting of the volume is just right? So say if you're talking to someone, or if there's someone talking to you and you can't hear, you can only see the lips moving and you can't hear what she's saying, then that volume is too loud. So Miss Nielsen.
It's overall again about the noise dose of it. So considering if it's too loud for long, it's okay that it's loud for a little while, but then we need to bring it down again. Within the development of the devices, hearing phones, headphones, there are guidelines that has come up within recent years also telling what a maximum must be. That is what we will also see in our phones and using them with our hearing devices, that they indicate to us when it's too loud and that we should turn it down. That can be done with some of the default things that are presented on the phones, but there are also apps that has been developed for monitoring what the level is. There, of course, it's important to remember that that is, again, a noise dose of various frequencies, and it's the microphones of the devices that sets the limit of what they can measure. So there will also be cases there when we use our phones and others as noise dosimeters, where they pick up on things that may potentially not be harmful, such as wind. So if we move around and the microphone is picking up wind, which is a lower frequency, then it doesn't have to be that loud before the microphone will indicate that it is a noise exposure that is too loud. So we need to remember the limitations of those devices in that, but they are a good guideline for us in our daily life to ensure that we are not being exposed to loud sounds, listening to music, and participating in conversation via media.
And I think, Doc Joel, there are also devices that you can set the volume where they automatically go down if you reach a high volume. I think that's possible right now.
Yes. So some of the new personal listening devices, I think they have an automatic volume regulator. Yeah. So for the last question for tonight, this is from Miss Maglapid. So the question goes: how do we open the minds of the employers to include employee hearing assessment in their APE or annual physical examination? Dr. Calaquian?
Well, I always tell my patients and the people, prevention is the key. Don't wait for your ears to be deaf. No? So we need to begin the hearing assessment as early as the first few months of their employment, and that prevention is the key. That's the only thing that can open their minds. And sometimes I demonstrate to them what deafness would sound like. You know, so sometimes I show patients who are deaf, you know, and so make them realize, you know, what deaf really means. You know? You'll be a social outcast actually if you're deaf. As they say, it's better to be blind than to be deaf. Because if you're blind, you can still socialize with other people. But if you're deaf, people will develop depression because they cannot go out and socialize with other people. So they become outcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Calquet. How about Ms. Nielsen?
I think it covers quite well what Dr. Christoph has just talked about. You are the specialist within what can be done nationally, and it really varies around the world how this is addressed, because our society is set up in so many different ways, and the responsibility is placed in different places. So it depends on how the local laws is placed, how the regulations, as Dr. Christoph has also talked about, has been established, and that is what depends on how the screening programs will be implemented in facilities of the occupation.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Calaquian and Ms. Nielsen, for your answers. For other questions that didn't get featured, our guest speakers will answer the questions and our social media team will post it on our Facebook page. Thank you once again to our guest speakers, to our partners, to Interacoustics for the first ever Here to Aid collaboration with you, and to KonsultaMD. To all our viewers, our customer service will get in touch with you within 24 hours to provide your free KonsultaMD code. Also, the winners of our Interacoustic merchandise giveaways will be announced tomorrow. Thank you for watching Here to Aid Episode 7 and have a good night.
Thank you, Dr. Joel.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Doctor, and thank you.